Hello again. Last week I talked about preparing for Jesus to come afresh into our lives as we journey through this time of Advent. I pointed out that Jesus was probably the biggest change agent of all time and that many people rejected him for that. I wonder whether you find that strange. Interestingly, most human beings actually find change really hard, so I guess it's hardly surprising that when Jesus came and suggested new ways of doing things, asked people to change their lives around, that he got met with a fair bit of resistance. Especially when we think of some of the things that he was saying. Some of them just didn't seem to make sense to the people of the day. Things like, have mercy on those who don't deserve it. Or cut down the branches that aren't bearing fruit. Ouch! Or welcome the sinner and the outcast and the stranger. My goodness, that's a challenge. Or give your possessions away and be generous with what you have. Be sacrificial in the way you use your money and your possessions. Wow, costly. No wonder the people didn't like it, and no wonder to many it seemed so outrageous that all they could do was reject what he was saying and inviting them into. One of the difficulties of being a leader in any context, and of course Jesus was a leader, is that you can never please everyone. Jesus actually pleased few people. It's interesting, isn't it? How often we hear about the crowds that followed him, but when it came to the crunch, very few actually then stuck at it. But he stuck to his mantra that if we wanted to sign up for the promise of new life, that meant change. It meant letting go of our own egos. It meant letting go of our own wants and desires. It meant being willing to be changed by him. And last week I encouraged you to spend some time just sitting in silence and allowing yourself to open yourself up to be changed by the love of God. This week I want to invite you to do something a little different. I want to invite you to consider how God is working through you in the life of your church, whether that be one of the churches in this benefice or in the circuit or further afield. Certainly in the benefice here, we're praying that God would help our churches to grow in numbers, in spiritual commitment and in service to our local community. But if that's going to happen, our churches will need to change, because growth always means change. And some things will not go back to the way they were pre-COVID, because God has been moving throughout that time and moving us in a new direction. Ouch, again. That can be painful. Because for some, that's going to demand some sacrifices. We have to let go of some of the things we loved to do pre-COVID, and we're now saying we're not going to do those anymore. Some of us might like some of the new directions that our churches are beginning to go in, and for some of us, that will be more costly. I wonder where you fall on that continuum. Just as God calls us to prepare the way for him in our personal lives, he calls us to do that in our church life too. And that's what we're trying to do. Sometimes that will mean trying new things and letting go of some of the old things as we seek to be church communities that provide opportunities for people to discover the life-changing love of God for themselves. And I understand that as we make some changes, that will be costly for some of you. But I encourage you to remember this. It's usually some kind of disturbance that actually brings about change. Disturbance can bring us face to face with our own egos, and it can force us either to dig in and become hard and resentful and to refuse change, which is of course what many of the folk who were encountering Jesus did, or It can encourage us to take the risk and let go of what we hold on to and trust that as we embrace change, God will bring new life. And of course, that's what many of the people following Jesus did too. And it was those ones that became true disciples and that knew new life. New life comes when we're willing to let go and embrace what God is calling us into. Yes, it's costly, but actually it's the way to a fulfillment in Christ that we'll never otherwise know. It can be surprising. And so this Advent, I invite you to consider, what might God be asking you to graciously let go of in the life of our churches, as we think and pray through and continue to try and embrace some of the new things God seems to be leading us into, whilst acknowledging that that might mean that we have to let go of just some of the old. Painful, yes, it might be. But if we're following the way God is leading, it will bring life. And life not just to us, but life to others, because that's what we're here for. We're here to bring life to others as we share the love of God. So will you be willing to embrace change in our life of our churches this Advent?